20 I was 14. When I asked one question about my body, my mother burned the book. The scorched corner of the paper is the size of a sparrow's wing. I have laid it flat on the oilcloth beside a cup of chamomile that has gone cold for the third time tonight. The kerosene lamp is low. Kitchen clock says 4:47 in the morning. My thumb knows the edge of this paper better than it knows my own wedding ring. My name is Mary. I am 78 years old. I was born in a plain farmhouse outside Mount Hope, Ohio, and I have carried this small burned thing inside the hem of my prayer cap for 64 winters. No one living has seen it. What I am about to tell you, I have never said aloud. Before I go further, sit with me a moment. This is Mary, and on this channel, I tell the quiet things women like me were never allowed to speak in daylight. If my voice keeps you company tonight, you are welcome to stay. Subscribe if you would like to hear the rest, and whisper in the comments where you are sitting as you listen. I will read everyone. The paper smells faintly of wood smoke still. 64 years and the smoke has not left it. I lift it close to the lamp so the orange light goes through the thinnest part of the corner, and for a breath I can see the 3 words again. I will not say them yet. I am not ready. My hand is steady, which surprises me. At 78, a steady hand is a small mercy. The house is quiet. The woodstove has gone down to coals. Somewhere in the back room, my old cat shifts against the floorboards. I am alone the way a woman is alone when the man she married for 47 years has been buried for 9. In the community I was raised in, a girl's body was a topic for after the wedding night, and never before. That is not me speaking ill of my people. That is me telling you the kitchen I came from. We were taught to keep our hands busy and our questions folded. The midwife, Mrs. Eicher, sometimes carried thin books inside her satchel, slipped between clean cloths, and the women in the wash house sometimes passed those books hand to hand like a borrowed thimble, quietly received, quietly returned, tolerated, until they were not. I did not know yet which side of that line my own mother stood on. I would learn on a Tuesday. It was March of 1962. I was 14. I was kneading bread on the long pine table by the window, and an English car drove past on the road, and for 3 seconds a piece of music came in through the open window before the car carried it away. I do not remember the song. I remember the way the silence sounded after. 11 days before that morning, my body had begun to bleed, and no one in our house had spoken a single word to me about what was happening to me. My body had become a stranger living under my dress, and the stranger was frightened, and I did not know who to ask. What I had not told anyone was that 9 days earlier, at the well baby visit for my littlest brother, the county nurse, Mrs. Hostetler, had pressed something into my hand at the door, a thin gray pamphlet, slim as a folded handkerchief. She did not say a word. She only looked at me a long second, and her eyes were kind in a way I had not seen eyes be kind before. I slid the pamphlet into the pocket of my apron. I carried it there for 9 days. I felt its weight against my hip every time I bent to feed the chickens. I never opened it. I was too afraid of what the words might say, and more afraid of what they might not. There was an older cousin in our family. Her name was Lavina. I am saying it now because I have not said it in 63 years, and because she belongs in this story, even though her story is not mine to tell. Lavina was 16 the autumn she stopped being at the supper table. The aunts stopped saying her name first, then my mother stopped, then I stopped. I do not know with certainty what happened to her. I only know that the grown women in our wash house sometimes carried information the way other people carry contraband, hand to hand, low and quick. I did not know yet that some questions are answered by what is taken away from you. 3 days the question lived in my throat like a small stone. I rehearsed it while I fed the chickens. I rehearsed it while I stitched a sleeve. I rehearsed it lying on the cornhusk mattress beside my sleeping younger sister, watching the moon move across one square of window pane. Question was only 7 words long. 7 small words. I could not get them past my teeth. I was afraid my mother would be angry. I was more afraid she would not be. I was most afraid she would look at me the way the ants had stopped looking at Lavina. Tuesday evening, supper dishes were dried and stacked. My father had gone out to the barn to see to a calving heifer. Younger children had been sent up the narrow stair to bed. The kerosene lamp was burning low on the oilcloth, and the smell of yeast was still in my hands from the morning bread. My mother sat across from me, mending the elbow of one of my brother's shirts, and the only sound in the world was the clock and her needle. I reached into the pocket of my apron. I slid the pamphlet out. I laid it on the oilcloth between us. I opened my mouth. My mother did not look at the pamphlet. My mother looked at my face. She looked at my face for so long that the lamp flickered twice between us, and her needle went still in her hand, and I felt the 7 words rise up in my throat the way bread rises in a warm bowl. Then she set the mending down. She stood up from her chair. She walked, without one single word, across the pine floor to the wood stove. The iron door creaked open. The orange light spilled out across the front of her apron, and my question was still inside my mouth. The orange light is on her apron. Her right hand is on the iron handle. My hand is still on the pamphlet, and the paper feels suddenly warm, though the stove is across the room. I hear her swallow. It is a small, wet sound, and it does not belong to anger. I did not understand that yet. I was 14, and I read her stillness as the stillness before a storm. I held my breath the way a child holds a breath under bed covers. Clock on the shelf kept moving. The lamp kept burning, and my mother turned her face just enough that I could see only the line of her jaw. She crossed back to the table. She did not snatch the pamphlet. She lifted it the way she lifted a hot pie from the oven, both hands and with care, as if the thing itself were not the danger. She carried it back to the stove. I sat in my chair, and I could not move. Pages rustled once against her palm. The cover bent before it caught. And then the small gray book that the county nurse had pressed into my hand 9 days earlier began to burn 1 page at a time. Slow, the way a leaf burns when there is no wind. I want to tell you what I expected. I expected shouting. I expected a hand across my face. I expected to be told I had brought the world into the house, and that the bishop would hear of it before sunrise. None of those things happened. My mother stood in front of the open stove door, and her shoulders did not shake, and her voice did not rise. I finally pushed the 7 words out of my mouth. "Ma'am, is something wrong with my body?" I did not lift the end of the sentence into a question. I was too tired by then. It came out flat, the way you say a thing when you already know no one will answer. She did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the flame, and she answered me in a voice so quiet and so... Even it sounded almost like a woman reading from a book that no longer existed. "There is nothing for you to know yet. That was all. No sermon, no slap, no scripture." A woman in her 40s at 8:14 in the evening on an ordinary Tuesday in March, closing a stove door. The latch clicked. The orange line under the door went thin. She wiped her hands on her apron the way she wiped them after kneading dough, and then she turned around. Her face was wet. I want you to hear me on this because I did not understand it for almost 60 years. The wet on her face was not from the heat of the stove. The wet was already there before she stood up from the chair. The crying had come first. Burning had come second. My mother had wept before she ever touched the book. I saw it for one breath, and then she lowered her chin, and she walked past me to the basin, and she washed her hands a long time. I sat at the table with the smell of wood smoke and yeast on my fingers, and I did not cry. Something else was happening to me that was not crying. Later that night, when the house was breathing the slow breath of sleep, I crept down the stair in my bare feet. I opened the stove door with a stick from the kindling box. Most of the pamphlet was gone, soft gray ash. One corner had fallen short of the heart of the fire. I lifted it out with the stick. I held it in my apron. It was no bigger than a sparrow's wing. There were 3 words on it that the flame had not eaten. I will not tell you what they were. I have carried them 64 years, and they are the one thing in my life that has been only mine. I folded the scrap into the hem of my prayer cap that night, and I have moved it from cap to cap ever since. For most of my life, I believed my mother had burned that book to silence me. I believed it through my own wedding. I believed it through the births of my own 4 children. I believed it the day I stood at her grave in a wool coat too thin for the wind. Sometime around my 60th winter, sitting alone in this same kitchen with a different cup of chamomile, understanding came to me the way understanding comes to old women, slow and without permission. My mother burned that book because if I had been found with it, the punishment would not have stopped with me. It would have reached her. It would have reached my father. It might have reached the cousin whose name I have only said once tonight. Both things are true. She took something from me, and she shielded me. The system that made those 2 acts, the same act is the thing I have spent the long end of my life trying to name without bitterness. I also did not ask again. I also did not speak. I passed a smaller silence to my own daughter once, over a question of her own, and I have carried that too. If there was a question your mother could not answer, you do not have to tell me the whole story. You can leave just one word for it in the comments below. One word for the question she could not give you. I will read every one. You who are listening tonight, you who were also handed a closed door instead of a sentence. You who learned your own body from strangers, or from pain, or from the slow guesswork of years, you are allowed to grieve a woman who loved you in a language the world had not yet given her. You are allowed to hold both things at once, taking and the shielding, the flame and the wet face before the flame. I am back at the oilcloth now. Chamomile has gone cold for the 4th time, and I do not mind. The scorched corner is still under my thumb. 64 years I have kept it closed against my palm, and tonight, for the first time, I am going to slide it across the table toward the lamp, where you might almost see the 3 words. Almost. My mother did not burn a book that night. She burned the only language she had, so that I might live long enough to find another one. Good night, friend. Sleep gentle. The lamp will stay on a little while longer.